approximation or rounding off. There are several ways in which they can tell you to round off or approximate. You can round off to the nearest whole number. You can round off in decimal places. You can round off in significant figures. And you can round off or approximate based on place value. Starting off with rounding off to the nearest whole number. That's rounding this to the nearest whole number. For you to round off to the nearest whole number, that means you have to have decimals, which means they want you to take off the decimal. Now for the first question, which is 245.4, round off to the nearest whole number. That means this 4 would have to disappear. So we have to get this 4 off. And when you're rounding off or approximating, if you are taking off the 4 or you are taking off the number to get to the last number where you have to stop, you can only add 1 to the number where you have to stop, where your number is above 4. That's from 5 up to 9. Since this is 4, the answer is simply 245. For the second question, since we have 5 here, we are supposed to round off to the nearest whole number. That means everything behind the decimal and the decimal must disappear. And this is 5. Since we want this 5 to go off, we are adding 1 to this 5. Since when we want to make the number disappear, if it's 5 to 9, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9, if you are taking it off, we have to add 1 to the number in front of it. So we have the answer to the second question as 246. You can see the difference between the first and the second question. For the second question, we have 5. For the first question, we had 4. 4 is not up to 5, so when we are taking it off, we don't add 1 to the number in front of it. For this one, we add 1 to the number in front of it. Look at this third question, to the nearest whole number. This question is a bit technical. People will take off this 9 first, add 1 to this 4, then make it 5, then I'll add 1 to this 5 to turn it to the nearest whole number. In this case, you don't consider any other number apart from the number behind the number where you have to stop. Now this is 4. We're stopping at 5. We're supposed to round off to 5. So this 4 is what we consider. We don't have anything to do with this 9. So with this 4, since the 4 is not up to 5, we are throwing this 4 and this 9 away. So we'll be having 245. Note, what you need to consider is the number behind the number where you have to stop. If this is 4, you don't need to approximate this 9, then the 4. No. You just take the 4 and just approximate with the 4, ignoring the 9. Since 4 is not up to 5, our answer is 245. So the answer to question C is 245. For the last question, we have 245.9. And we're stopping at 5 since we want to stop at the whole number. The decimal is not needed and the 9 too has to go away. Since this is 9, since it's greater than 4, when we're taking the 9 away, we add 1 to this 5. So the answer to this is 246. Next question says round off to 1 and 2 decimal places. We have to round off all these questions to 1 and 2 decimal places. The first one to 1 decimal place means after the decimal, 1 digit after the decimal, which is this digit. So you consider the number in front of it, which is 0. We're stopping at this one for 1 decimal place. The number in front of it is 0. That means your answer should be 0.0. Since it's not up to 5, we can't take it and add 1 to this. This is where we have to stop at this 1 decimal place, and the number behind it is 0. So it's 0.0 to 1 dp. And to 2 dp, that means we have to stop here. That means 2 digits after the decimal, digit 1 and digit 2. That's 2 decimal places. The number after the digit is 9. So when this 9 is going off, since it's not less than 5, when we are taking it off, we add 1 to this. Your answer is 0.01. This is to 2 decimal places. For the second question, to 1 decimal place, that means you have to stop at this 9. Now to 1 decimal place, since we are stopping here, that means the number we have to consider is this 9 after it. 1 decimal place is this digit. Then the digit we need to know if we would add 1 to it or not is this 1 behind it. This is 9, and if we are taking away this 9 and this 4, they are going off, and we're not even including the zeros because they are behind the decimal. Because of this 9, you have to add 1 to this 9 in front. This 9 in front, you have to add 1 to it. And adding 1 to 9 makes it 10. So if it's 10, you would have to leave a 0 here, then add 1 to this 4 and make it 5. Because you can't just write 24.10. Since this 9 has now turned to 10, you will be leaving your 0 here, then adding 1 to this 4. So your answer to 1 dp would be 25.0. 1 dp. That's for this question B. To 1 dp is 25.0. If this 9 is adding 1 to this 9, it's turning to 10, Then if it's turning to 10, you leave the 0 of the 10 behind, then you add 1 to the 4, that's 25.0. To 2 decimal places, that means we have to stop here. That for the second one, we're stopping here. That's 2 digits after the decimal. Second digit after the decimal is 9. What determines if we are adding 1 to it or not is the number behind it, and in this case it's 4. Since it's less than 5, we can take it off without adding 1 to it. 24.99 to 2 decimal places, to 2 dp. So the answer to this question as regards to 2 decimal places is 24.99. For question C, rounding off this to 1 decimal place means we're stopping at this first 9. That's the first digit behind the decimal, meaning we only consider this 9, the 9 behind. And since it's greater than 4, so when we're taking it off with this 5, we have to add 1 to this 9. And once we add 1 to this 9, it turns to 10. Since it turns to 10, we can't write 24.10 or 24.10. So we have to leave 0 here, then add 1 to this 4 and make it 5. So we have it as 25.0 to 1 dp. Then to 2 decimal places, we have to stop here. That's the second 9. This is it. And what we have to consider is the number behind it, which is this 5. Since if we are taking away the number behind the number where we have to stop, and we have to either add 1 or leave it, since we would have to add 1 if the number is greater than 4, which is 5. So if we are taking away this 5, we add 1 to this 9, this 9 turns to 10. If it turns to 10, we can't leave it at 10, we'll leave it with the 0. We'll be left with 0 here, then we'll add 1 to this, and this 9 now becomes 10 again. We can't write 10 here, we can't have double digits here. Since we have 10 here, we can't leave our 10 here, then we'll be left with 0, then add 1 to this 4. This 4 now becomes 5. That's where we stop. So rounding off to the nearest 2 decimal places, since we added 1 to this 4, it will now be 25. So we have it as 25.00. We are not throwing away these 2 zeros because we have to make it still 2 decimal places, that's 2 dp. So we have 2 zeros behind the decimals, which is 2 decimal places, because once we take away this 5, and this 5 would have to add 1 to this 9, we can't leave this as 10. So if it's 10, we will have to leave the 0, then add 1 to this. Then since it's 10 again, we have to leave the second 0, then add 1 to this 4, and this 4 becomes 5. So we have that as 25.00. Remember to always put your 00 since you have to stop at 2 decimal places. So for this question, the answer to it is 25.00. For the last question, 245.234 to 1 decimal place. That means we have to stop at this 2 behind the decimal. We're stopping here. And for us to know if you're adding 1 to this 2 or not, it is determined by the number behind it, which is 3. Since it's less than 5, then when we're taking the 3 and the 4 off, we're not adding 1 to this 2. Answer to this question to 1 decimal place is simply 245.2 to 1 dp. Then to 2 decimal places, the same question, we count 2 digits after the decimal, 1, 2. So the second digit is 3. Now what determines if we add 1 to this 3 when we are taking this 4 away? If it's 5 or more. Since it's less than 5 and it's 4, we're throwing it away, we're getting it out without adding 1 to this 3. So our answer to 2 decimal places is 245.23 to 2 decimal places.